he gets privileges to go back and forth as a former member.
Oh, God.
But I think he has to stand. He couldn't sit anywhere.
Oh, that's why I thought he was like sitting next to the gates for
Oh, he was.
Which one?
This one. It was like him and Burgess.
Is he gonna make himself
It was like sitting in a row or something.
Oh my God. That's actually fire.
I wanted to know what Burgess was like.
Oh yeah.
They were deep
Yeah, they were gone for a while.
Yeah.
But then they still did like
NTG.
Yeah, he was
Making the face so good. So Kevin.
it's kind of the same face Kevin's making right now.
They put your name, you put your picture up.
Smile away.
But here, come on.
Yes, thank you.
Thank you.
So is that?
I don't want to talk about that right now.
I really like it. Yes.
Comment.
You can see it, there's like a little miniature studio.
Period.
It's right next to the miniature studio.
So being.
You can tell it. You can tell it. It's right
See
there.
that video that Jay got of you scheming was.
I was not scheming, I was like making it.
You looked like you were scheming.
He was like making faces at him. Kevin likes to scheme. We all know this.
Yeah, get something permanent.
Yep.
What time did you get last night, Kevin?
I went to bed at 2:30.
We were all here so late.
I had to cut sound bites for that this morning, and I was in at 6:45.
I can figure out how to get out of here.
How did you
Really?
With like the bear.
At what time?
At like midnight.
I walked out at 11:40. Said
Max.
I went through.
They were locked up.
Oh no, Emancipation Hall. Just walk straight through.
Yeah. Right this way.
When
sir.
Max is coming through, they're just like,
Yeah,
open
they're
the gates.
Everyone was getting down. It was just so.
I might have been a bit before you. I was just trying to get off the campus because I was on my bike and they couldn't decide whether I was allowed on the sidewalks or not.
Oh,
So I did get yelled at like 5 times.
You're an aggressive cyclist, yeah.
I was like, I'm just trying to get home. He was like, follow the cars. I was like, but they're going to the interstate. Help me.
I don't want to die.
This was everybody last night. Minus those check marks, or the ones that weren't checked. So it was just like.
That's not actually that bad.
No, it was
Right,
fine.
I think I got that many myself.
It was good.
Oh, don't let that bother you.
Rested.
It's not supposed to be low. This is why they call it like fluid head.
And then Stem talked up. And the governor's come by.
Remember the old cows were just leak all over the heads. Because they actually use their,
Unfortunately, Santos
reservoir.
Unfortunately, I know you're so upset about that. I know you're heartbroken.
A single tear was shed by Kevin that night. Please tell me he wasn't one of these. He probably is. Who's that?
I'm trying this up. There's like an air vent right there.
I never quiet.
Yeah, it's better over here.
Yep.
Sorry, you were lovely company on that side of the room, but it's 5 degrees warmer over here.
I know you just want to hit.
I do. I just want to say to you.
We went through a lot. I used to be able to listen to you. Second crazy.
This one right here.
A lot of hoops dropped. Okay, I think it's an ethics violation to announce your campaign from the floor of the House.
Yeah.
Representatives.
I think you're right.
The tweet was like really timed.
Yeah, because it could have been
Yeah.
a free.
You could have
But it's like,
preloaded or whatever.
obviously you're new if you thought it was gonna be over at 9:52.
That is accurate.
He like wrote that it was written as if it had just wrapped up.
Yeah.
Like,
It was, yeah.
Sir, this has an hour left.
I just heard the I was like, bro, who's 20 minutes in? We're not even at the halfway point.
No.
gotta make a splash.
Sounds good.
They made me
people. I mean, it's just a couple.
I mean, it's gonna be a big ton of positions.
Don't jinx it.
Across Canada, there's been,
All running in.
yeah, which was funny because like the response was pretty good afterwards. Oh, so we've never seen that for a while. Just waiting for
got the motorcade, the
people
open.
showing up.
I don't think they stuck to it.
And
Seemed like they had two to go, man. You gotta get the motorcade.
Yeah.
What about your gaps?
Probably
So sad.
This was a famous question that Phil Rucker shouted at Mitt Romney on his trip to Europe during the 2012.
There he is.
Because it's like Phil yelling at his
With that
son,
whole stutter,
nasally
stuttered
voice.
caller.
What about your gaps? But
You might not want to know where
oh
I
my
was
God,
in
I think
2012.
are you old enough to remember the Mitt Romney "What about your gaps" thing?
I mean, I remember like
In 2012, when Phil Rucker yelled at Mitt Romney, "What about your gaps?" when he was in Europe doing a trip. All right, I'm just feeling really old now.
I'm just
It's
remembering
fine.
like what binders full of women.
I mean that too, yes. And I think that may have been one of the gaps to which
Oh,
Phil was referring when he
There you
asked
go.
the question.
Take like what wrote it.
What? That's
Heads
upsetting.
up.
heads up.
Okay.
We got it. Thank
Oh,
you.
okay.
Also punchy.
Good morning, everyone.
Morning.
Smoking Joe Biden was on fire during the State of the Union address. He was lit, delivered a compelling vision for the American people, and crushed MAGA extremism. Questions?
One of the more notable parts of the speech is when Biden discussed Laken Riley's death. He referred to the person who allegedly murdered her as an illegal. Do you have any thoughts on that rhetoric? I know some CHC members were unhappy with that.
Yeah, President Biden laid out a comprehensive vision for fixing our broken immigration system and addressing the challenges at the border. He also acknowledged the horrific nature of the murder, and of course emphasized the need more generally to keep our communities safe.
To follow up on that question, there were members of your caucus who were upset with his language. Do you have a response to that?
Joe Biden delivered an incredible speech that was very well received by the American people, beginning, middle, and end. Kevin?
Two very distinctively different things. One, the TikTok legislation is seemingly going to the floor next week. Where do you stand on that legislation? Do you support it? And two, you have a photo of George Santos on the poster beside you. What do you make of the fact that he is back on the scene here in Capitol Hill and is apparently running in New York 1?
With respect to the TikTok-related legislation, there was a strongly bipartisan vote that is impressive in nature in any instance, but particularly as it relates to something in the social media space, which hasn't always been easy for Democrats and Republicans to find common ground. I look forward to having a conversation with Frank Pallone, as well as Raja Krishnamurthy, the lead Democrat on the legislation, about the way forward in advance of floor consideration.
In regards to the news that came up just before the...
Oh, I'm sorry.
Oh.
I forgot to address my favorite topic.
I was waiting for it.
It's kind of an extraordinary thing that this guy won't go away. But it's indicative of the reality that there's a clear choice in terms of what the American people face between Democrats and Republicans, between a vision that President Biden laid out to move America forward and build an economy that's healthy and that puts working families, middle-class families, and those who aspire to be part of the middle class first, as compared to the extreme MAGA Republicans who want to turn back the clock. And stick us with massive tax cuts for the wealthy, the well-off, and the well-connected. Marjorie Taylor Greene and George Santos are running the House Republican Conference. And at this point, it's Marjorie Taylor Greene on the inside and Santos on the outside, but clearly he's trying to come back. Now, here's the choice that the American people are going to face over the next few months. Team normal versus team chaos. Team reasonable versus team dysfunction. And team get stuff done versus team extreme. Team Biden versus team Marjorie Taylor Greene and George Santos. And that's a clear choice for the American people. I was wondering what was happening in this side of the room.
Thank you. One thing that didn't get mentioned last night was the Farm Bill, and that's up for reauthorization this year. Do you still have confidence that that could get done in 2024, or will you need to extend it again?
It's my hope that we are going to be able to get the Farm Bill done by the end of the fiscal year and or the calendar year. And Democrats, as we have been committed in other areas, will continue to find bipartisan common ground with our Republican colleagues. As we've said, on any issue, whenever and wherever possible, in order to make life better for the American people. The Farm Bill has always been bipartisan, and as long as the extreme MAGA Republicans in the House recognize that reality, they can't govern without Democratic support. Every single thing that has happened in this Congress that meaningfully impacts the American people in a positive way has been because House Democrats have provided a majority of the votes necessary to get things done. And that, of course, will be the case as it relates to the Farm Bill. I'll stick on this side.
Over on the Senate side, there's some Republican infighting over earmarks in the government funding package. I believe you have some of your own in the minibus. What do you make of the backlash earmarks receive when they are allowed?
Well, community-funded projects are an important part of enabling members of Congress on both sides of the aisle to identify priorities related to the expenditure of taxpayer dollars, and that authority rests with the Congress, not anybody else, according to the Constitution, the Congress. And so I do think it's important in a very modest way, which is the case connected to community-funded projects, that are heavily vetted to make sure that they are equitable and effective and efficient expenditures of taxpayer resources, that it's a part of the appropriations process that is bipartisan and advances the ball for the American people.
On Ukraine, some Republicans have started to float the idea of making a loan guarantee as a way to get them the funds they need to carry out the war. Is that something that Democrats would be open to considering if it meant getting Ukraine aid sooner than waiting for Speaker Johnson to bring up the Senate supplemental, which seems very clearly not going to happen?
The only way forward with respect to meeting the national security needs of the American people is for House Republicans to put the bipartisan national security comprehensive bill sent over from the Senate on the floor for an up or down vote. And everybody in the House knows that were that to happen, there will be about 300 votes or more in support of the bipartisan comprehensive national security bill. So we can meet the needs of our allies, our democratic allies in Ukraine, in Israel, in the Indo-Pacific, and also surge humanitarian assistance to Palestinian civilians in Gaza who are in harm's way through no fault of their own, and also civilians in theaters of war all across the country. The bipartisan, comprehensive, Senate-passed national security bill is the only way forward. We need an up or down vote. It's time for the House Republicans to support the national security interests of the American people and break from the pro-Putin MAGA extremists in their party.
Given the quorum from last night, is there some prospect for real bipartisanship before the next election in this Congress?
Well, we are going to continue to find bipartisan common ground, exercising common sense whenever and wherever possible with our Republican colleagues on any issue. And we've done that repeatedly from the very beginning of this Congress with respect to avoiding a catastrophic default on our nation's debt, funding the government, repeatedly keeping it open and avoiding a shutdown, passing the National Defense Authorization Act, securing $16 billion in assistance for communities that have been devastated by extreme weather events, passing tax legislation that includes the low-income housing tax credit and an enhanced child tax credit, and most recently, providing the majority of votes necessary to get the first 6 appropriations bills over the finish line. We are going to continue to govern in a common sense way, and we're just asking our Republican colleagues to stop the political stunts. That was an embarrassment last night. A complete embarrassment. Marjorie Taylor Greene, who's basically running the House Republican Conference, shows up in campaign paraphernalia. And then these people want to lecture Joe Biden because he delivered a strong and forceful speech that made them uncomfortable because he exposed their lies and shamelessness. We have one message for extreme MAGA Republicans who want to lecture us about decorum. Get lost. You're a joke. Exhibit A, Marjorie Taylor Greene. Exhibit B, George Santos.
I was worried you weren't going to come back to me, but
Yeah.
wanted to ask you about President Biden's announcement that he had just before State of the Union, but he did talk about it briefly during his speech, the emergency pier being set up on the coast of Gaza. Can you talk to me about the significance of having that, especially as it's been a growing concern for many within your own party?
It was an important announcement in the context of making sure that we can surge humanitarian assistance to Gaza in order to address the clear needs of Palestinian civilians who are in harm's way in a theater of war through no fault of their own, as President Biden articulated. There are 3 pressing things that need to be accomplished in the context of the war between Israel and Hamas. Israel, as President Biden articulated, has a clear, unequivocal right to defend itself against Hamas, a brutal terrorist organization that inflicted unspeakable atrocities on 10/7. At the same time, we need to make sure that we get the hostages out and can surge humanitarian assistance in to Gaza. And the announcement with respect to establishing a pier that will facilitate surging humanitarian assistance should be welcomed by everyone, because no one should be able to accept the suffering that we've seen in Israel and now the casualties and the conditions that civilians are dealing with. And as President Biden appropriately pointed out, because Hamas could care less about its own citizens. And that's a very challenging situation, and there's a clear need for the United States to step in the way that President Biden has articulated.
So I think, unless I'm mistaken, Fitzpatrick discharge petition for his version of Ukraine aid matures today, and I think a couple days ago he mentioned there might be one more crack at changes that might need to happen in the event that try to win over some Democratic members to support that measure. Have you spoken with him at all about what those changes might have to be in order to win over members from your side of the aisle?
Well, President Biden made clear during the State of the Union address that we have to make sure we are surging humanitarian assistance into theaters of war across the world. And there's not a dime of humanitarian assistance in the legislation that has been introduced by Representative Fitzpatrick. So that's a non-starter for the House Democratic Caucus. Thank you, everyone.
What did you think of Santos's outfit?
He's a complete total embarrassment.
Even the shoes?